The views and opinions expressed on this platform are of me, myself, and I, not any agency I'm affiliated with. So please do not take what I say personally. Coming up on almost episode 30 of the podcast, I have somebody on near and dear to my heart. He's a good, solid dude, but also he saved my life before. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Our families have close ties together. Coming at you on the podcast, we got Ronnie Hill. Ronnie has 10 years in EMS under his belt. He has been an EMT basic, an advanced EMT, and is now a paramedic. Congratulations, Ronnie. State credentials instructor. He is an instructor in BLS, ACLS, PALS, newly appointed FTO. Good job, Ronnie. And also, we're going to touch on it, an associate's degree in emergency medical services. Ronnie's got a lot behind his name. So Ronnie, if you want to tell the people who you are, what you stand for, go ahead.
So first I want to say you read it exactly like I wrote it. I appreciate that. The check's in the mail, okay? So, as you said, my name's Ronnie Hill. I've been in EMS for a while. Started out in the fire department, and of course we'll talk about that. But started out in the fire department and my way into EMS, and wouldn't trade it for anything.
So Ronnie and I used to run at the same company together. The one I'm actually returning back to, and I'm so excited. But back when I was a baby basic, Ronnie actually saved my life before. So I'll give my side of the story. It was fresh into when I learned I had an allergic reaction to strawberries. This was still fresh. I usually, when I would eat them, back when I was still learning, it was just a little scratchy throat. I got a little itchy, no big deal, whatever. We were doing an LDT coming back from New Orleans, which New Orleans to the station we were working at, it was not a short drive. It was a pretty long haul. And I looked at my book sack because I was getting a little sleepy, but we were fine. I just needed something to snack on. And I saw this little bag of assorted dried fruits, and one of which were strawberries. But I was like, no big deal. I'm gonna just snack on this. We'll have a good time. I think Ronnie, you were on the phone with somebody, and started getting a little tickle in my throat, and I'm like, whew, man, started coughing a little bit. And Ronnie was like, are you good? I was like, yeah, man, I think I'm fine. So everything progressed. Ronnie, if you want to pick it up from there.
Yeah, so we were coming back from New Orleans, had a little transfer down there. It was about 2 hours, I think, about 2 hours from where we picked up from and back to our station. We stopped in Port Allen to get fuel. And we get back on the road, and it's kind of late. It's probably like 10-something at night, maybe 10, 11-something at night. We're on the way back. And a few minutes down the road, you just kind of like out of the blue, you're eating these dried fruit things, or this dried fruit, right? And so like out of the blue, you're like, haha, I think I'm allergic to strawberries, haha. And you just kind of like pop this out of nowhere on me. And I'm like, okay. By the way, this is our very first time working together. And you had not explained this to me at all at any point in time during the shift, any time prior to that, until you're already eating these things. A couple more minutes down the road, you start like coughing and coughing and coughing and you're driving too, by the way, and you're like coughing and coughing. And I'm like, are you okay? It's like, yeah, I'll be fine. I'll be fine the whole time that you're coughing. Well, it's an hour from like Port Allen back to our station, and you coughed the entire way, nonstop almost, from Port Allen to Port Barry back to our station. And then I'm like, look, whenever we get back, I've got to give you some medicine of some kind, because you are like, you're struggling over here. Like, no, I'm fine. Coughing. Well, we get back to the station, and you finally have been dealing with that long enough that you're like, okay, I think I want some medicine now. I said, okay. I said, well, look, I'll take you in the back, give you some Benadryl, give you a breathing treatment, albuterol treatment, and we'll see how it goes from there. But I told you, I was like, listen, if I have to give you an epi shot, like if it gets bad enough and I have to give you epi, you're going to the hospital like you don't have a choice. Like you've given me so much grief this whole time about giving you meds. Well, gave you some Benadryl, gave you a breathing treatment, kind of slowed down on the coughing. It's like, okay, yeah, I think I feel better. I think I'm gonna make it through the night. It's like, all right, that's fine. So we go in the station, and luckily we don't have any more calls for the rest of the night. And you did in fact make it through the night, thankfully. Didn't die on me. And then we went home at the end of the shift, and then that was it. And I think that was the first time you got sick at work. And of course, some people know about the stories after that of some of the other encounters and whatnot. But I think that was the first time at work that you had gotten sick from your allergic reactions.
Well, that's why in my will, you're giving my last unit call because Ronnie was the first one to save my life during an allergic reaction.
Ooh, look at you now.
So besides Ronnie saving my life, our ties actually run deep. There was one day where Ronnie texted me and was like, "Hey, is your grandpa Buddy Fairbanks?" And I was like, "Yes." Why? And come to find out, our relatives were like neighbors in the city where my grandpa like ran as a, I forgot whatever he was, somebody in the police force. But Ronnie, go back over those ties because the Fairbanks and Hillside run deep. Our ties run deep, my dude.
Oh, whenever you interviewed your dad, when you interviewed your dad, state trooper in Catahoula Parish, either he mentioned it or you mentioned it or something like that. I was like, well, that's funny because that's where I'm from. And I was like, I remember growing up. I didn't remember any specific person or whatever, but I was like, I remember there being Fairbankses up there where I came from. And it just never put the connection together until your dad said that. And I was like, oh, I said, I know, because Mama knows everybody. I was like, I know they know each other. And so I asked Mom, I said, hey, do you know, he was a trooper up there way back in the day, retired from up there as a trooper. I said, do you know a Buddy Fairbanks? She's like, yeah, I know him. I know some other Fairbankses and stuff like that that are up here now. And she said actually the neighbor across the street was, their maiden name was Fairbanks. I said, well, I just kind of found out in a roundabout way that somebody I used to work with down here, like I said, that your Fairbankses from up there are you, that's your people, that's the same people. So it's kind of interesting how like your grandpa's a state trooper, worked with my mom some as a paramedic and on the fire department in the area because all lived in that area, all had family up there and all that other kind of stuff. So, and she even still knows some Fairbankses up there to this day.
I love it. It was still like after going through the explanation of how everybody was running together, I'm like, you know what? I feel like now I can say that the first responder community runs in my blood and it runs deep. So that was eye-opening for me. So, Ronnie, let's start off. Tell me about your recent school endeavors, your associate's degree. What was that like and what does it entail?
So, first off, I'll say that I never was interested in going to college. So, I'm 32 and I never really was interested in going to college. I didn't try that hard. I didn't try to take any extra classes to set me up for college. I had no plans to go into college. I only planned on going to work. So I didn't really try. And now I still did good in school, and I still graduated near the top of my class and everything. But I just didn't, that wasn't for me. And I didn't go to college. I went to work instead. Well, as I got older, I began to have more of a passion for learning and learning and teaching. So I did that more. And so I got to thinking, I was like, well, I still don't have I still don't want to go to college per se as I got older, but I did like taking a whole lot of classes and getting a lot of certifications and stuff like that. Well, after I got my paramedic, I was like, you know what? I have half of what I need to be able to get a degree. So I talked to my wife about it. I was like, look, I want to get a college degree. I want to get a degree. A lot of my family on my dad's side, a lot of them didn't even finish school. And the few that did, they didn't even really they didn't go to college or anything like that. They just went to work. So talked to my wife about it. I was like, look, if I could fund this thing, I want to go to college. I want to get a degree. I said it won't take very long to be able to do, considering what I already had. So looked it up, talked to her about it. It's like, look, I think we could swing this. So in January of last year, I started my first classes with Columbia Southern University. So I was like, well, I'm gonna get a degree, in my field that I'm working on. And I started as a full-time student. So I started college, have 2 kids, had a 6-month-old at the time. I did that all the way up until the end of November of this past year, and I finished all my classes with a cumulative GPA of 4.0, and I got my degree, my associate's degree in EMS. Very proud of it. Definitely going to go back at some point in time. I'm looking at trying to be able to fund, going back for a bachelor's degree in EMS management. So that's the next step from here. And I really enjoyed it, and I'm so glad I went to the paramedic school that I went to, because of course paramedic schools have to be associated with colleges in order to be accredited, so you could get a paramedic degree. Get a paramedic certification. So that's how the system is set up, and the way they had their schoolwork set up was pretty much exactly like college. So even though I didn't know anything about college, never been to college before, I take that back. I did go to Texas Bible College. I did take some classes with way back in the day. I can't remember even what years that was. I was probably in my mid-20s whenever I did that. And that was so I had some experience with college, right? My paramedic school, the way they had their assignments and everything set up was pretty much exactly like college. And so whenever I started taking college, like the programs looked pretty much the same. All the assignments looked very similar. So I was like, okay, this isn't so bad. And it really wasn't. I didn't find, at least with this degree, I didn't find that the work was too terribly difficult. It's just kind of a lot, and I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to take any breaks because I wanted to finish it. So from the end of January to the very end of November, I was in school the whole time. And it was a lot, but, I made it through. And like I said, I'm very proud of it. I'm just waiting for that thing to come in the mail so I can, see it for a change, so I can really kind of become solid to me that I'm done, even though, thankfully I haven't had assignments to do for like over a month now. But that's kind of the thing with college and everything. Like, I really enjoyed the program. I enjoyed what I learned. And I'm looking forward to going back. I'm not looking forward to having to do all the work again. But like I said, I put myself on full-time schedule to be able to go ahead and get it done. So it took me 10 months to do my paramedic program. It took me 10 months to do college. And I finished up.
And it's super commendable. Dude, I didn't know you had a 4.0.
In the very last term, I was kind of wondering, like with my last 2 classes, I was like, man, and it wasn't that they were hard. It's just by the time, like, I knew it was my last 2 classes, I was so over school. Like, I was done with it. I was done with being there. I was like, man, I really need to stick with this. And I was really worried that I was going to actually break my streak, but I managed to pull it off.
I'm proud of you, Ronnie. Very proud of you.
And on top of that, too, I guess I'll go ahead and throw this in. I got invited to two different honor societies as part of getting my grades, but I didn't go to either one of them. I kind of have my reasons for that. Not saying that there's anything wrong with them, but I don't know. Like, maybe whenever I go back for my bachelor's degree, if I get invited to some honor societies, I'll do that then. I think it might be more worth it then than for my associate's degree, because I'm really pretty sure I'm going back.
So Ronnie, from the get-go, why did you even get into EMS all those years ago? Like, tell me about your start from EMT basic to paramedic. What made you want to take the leap to get your paramedic, all of that stuff and everything in between? Tell me about that.
Okay, so let's bring this all the way back to mid '90s. All right, let's go way back, and I'll try to keep this as concise as possible. But so very similar story to pretty much most all of your other guests, right? I had family that was in as were first responders, right? So I grew up around it. My parents were firefighters. Both of my parents were firefighters. My mom was a paramedic. My older brother was a paramedic. My mom was a paramedic for the company that I work for now. My brother was a paramedic for the company that bought out the company I work for now. It kind of come full circle in the end, but both of them were paramedics at the same time in the same area, but they worked for different ambulance services. But they were also all on the same fire department. Like my mom, my older brother, my dad, they were all in the same fire department. So I grew up with that as a kid. And I remember, going and getting on the ambulance. Mama would stop by while we were at the babysitters, and I'd go get on the ambulance and play in the back of the truck and stuff like that. Riding on the fire trucks and parades and stuff, and being around the fire station and going to fires and all that other stuff. So I pretty much knew I was going to do that, right? And I wanted to be that. But at least whenever I was in school, whenever I was in high school, it's like I didn't have a plan on wanting to be full, right? Plan was I was going to be like a volunteer, and I would go work a job. That way I could make good money. So I joined the fire department whenever I was 17. And with it being a real small town and everything, even the junior firefighters, quote unquote, they all still fought fire and drove trucks and everything, just simply out of necessity, right? Because we didn't have that many people. So I started off doing that on the fire department, and I knew that my plan was, as I said, I at least want to be firefighter one and EMT trained, at least, right? I didn't necessarily have a love for the medical or anything at the time. I was definitely more fire than anything else. And so I did that, and I got my firefighter one in 2008, right after I turned 18. A couple months after I turned 18, I got my firefighter one certification, and then I had already moved off. I'd moved to South Louisiana by then. Right after, like a month after I turned 18, I moved from up there. I moved down south. I live about 30 minutes from Baton Rouge, and I went to work with my brother in the plants. And so I was a dock operator in the plants, and I loaded all the barges on the river, and I kind of worked all over the place doing that. And I transferred to the fire department down here. I was doing that toward the end of my career as a firefighter. I worked as a contract firefighter. But now, here's something that I guess that you didn't know is in September of 2012, I actually got my EMR certification. So I started off as a first responder, and that's how I ended up being able to work part-time for the fire department, because I had my firefighter one and I got my medical certification, so I was able to work part-time. And so that's kind of my beginning. And so that's why I say 10 years, because I've had my EMR certification since then. I ended up getting to, in a roundabout way, I ended up getting to meet the owner of the company at the time. And I kind of got involved in being like a first responder, kind of like standby medic at the campgrounds for camp meetings, through kind of like him and one of his medics and stuff like that. And they really liked me, and they liked the way I worked and everything. And I found out a buddy of mine at the time that was an EMT that worked on the fire department with me. He worked full time for that ambulance service. And he told me one day, he's like, "Hey, they hire after I came back from working the camp meeting, it's like, they hire we hire EMRs, right?" I was like, "No, I did not know that." And he's like, "Yeah, we hire EMRs. You need to go check it out." So, okay, so I talked to him and said, "I want to work part-time as an EMR." So, okay. So they hired me in part-time in July of 2015. July of 2015. And so that's how long I've been at this company, because I haven't worked for any other ambulance service. Like, I got on the ambulance started working. I was like, man, I really, really love this. Like, I got to figure out how to get into this. And I had already kind of started, like, I've been working at that other company for almost 8 years. I was like, man, I'm really starting to, you know how whenever people say they hate their job? So, like, I was always, oh, I think that's bull crap. People hate their job. Well, I really, really, really started to hate my job. I wasn't hate the job, I hated the schedule because it was an on-call schedule. I worked 24/7 on call. So I told him, I said, I want a full-time spot. I want to come on full-time. Well, they kept offering me spots on the daylight truck. And I'm like, not a chance. I'm not coming over full-time for that. I said, if I'm coming over full-time, I'm coming on an ALS truck. Well, in the middle of all of that, my fire department started up an EMT class. And I told my boss, I was like, look, I said, I'm going to this EMT class. So I went to the EMT class. I started doing that. And before I could finish the EMT class, they finally offered me a full-time spot on an ALS truck, the same one that I'm on now. So I was like, okay. So I took it and I left the plants and I went to working on the ambulance. Now I want to tell you, that was a lot for me because I had been working in the same job for like almost 8 years. I had a lot of seniority. I was making really good pay because I was working in the plants, right? So I was making really good pay, had really good benefits, seniority, the whole. I was making all of that, making $21 an hour at the time, to go work on the ambulance for $12 an hour with health insurance, and that was it. I really, really loved what I was doing. So I was like, you know what, I could do that. That's fine. So I left, and I did it throughout 2016. I kind of finished up EMT school, and I got my EMT in March of 2017. So I had planned on, I was like, look, at this point in time, I kind of fell in love with it. I was going to go be a paramedic. So I was kind of already thinking ahead of time. I was like, I'm going to go to paramedic school in the fall. So if this is March 2017, in like August of that year, I was going to go to paramedic school. But a month or two later, one of the managers at EMT, first ever advance, you could take it for free, and you could be finished by the end of the year. I was like, okay, well, sign me up then. So I was like, well, this seems like, go to this advanced EMT class for free, be doing pretty much the same job, and not have to pay $10,000 getting in paramedic school. Yeah, let's do it. So I went into the advanced class, finished up that year. I got my advanced certification very end of December of that year. So I wasn't even EMT for like 9 months. And then I ended up getting my advanced EMT. Well, right after that, they put me in a medic spot on my truck. And I'd worked in that medic spot for the rest of the time that I've been here. So I got put in that medic spot, was doing that for a long time. And whether it be procrastination, whether it be lack of motivation, complacency, I didn't really try to pursue, paramedic after that. Well, during that time as an advanced, those years that I was doing that, I got promoted to FTO. I became an instructor a few months after I got my advanced and started teaching like EMR classes, EMT classes, and stuff like that. And then I got married. And, marriage does things to a man, right? Marriage changes a man. And I told my wife, I was like, look, I feel like that I'm not getting the best out of all of this. I said, I need to go to paramedic school. And so she supported me. I started school, paid for it and everything. And I was in school for 10 months, finished school. 6 days later, I had my paramedic in August of 2021. So that's kind of the journey of how, kind of how it started and went all the way through. I ended up I'm probably one of the few people that's been all 4 levels of certification, because that's not the typical route, right, that people normally take. But that's just kind of the way it fell out for me. And I'm glad that it did. It took way longer than it should have. But, that's okay. I'm still happy with what I got. And of course, right after I got my paramedic, a couple months later, I went into college. So it's kind of like almost been a nonstop thing for me to go from one type of school into another. And I think that's the whole story. I tried as best as I could, but I, I feel like somebody can really get something out of that.
Well, like you said, it's not a conventional route. And so it's kind of eye-opening to know that like you don't have to start from your EMT basic from the get-go, not knowing anything about EMS. You can start out small and go with the EMR, then work your way up. And you don't have to go straight from EMT basic to paramedic. You can make those small steps along the way, learn as you go until you reach your final destination. And it doesn't have to be paramedic. You can stop at EMT or you can stop at advanced like you're saying. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just going to say that's how it shook out for me, right? Would I've done things differently? Yes, I'd have done things differently. But I'm not going to suggest to other people that that's how they should do it, right? Like I feel like that you need to kind of work out your own way because some people that I've seen they want to go from EMT to paramedic and that's fine. And I know also some people that went from like EMT to advanced EMT, and I'm like, okay, like knowing what I know now, there's like no way that I would ever go back and be an advanced EMT again. Like if I would have known, I would have just went to paramedic school and I would have went straight on to paramedic. And I feel like I would have definitely gotten a whole more opportunity out of the deal. But that's just kind of the way it shook out for me. So
So, with all of your, especially the amount of schooling you've done nonstop, what have you learned that prevents burnout for you? And like, kind of on that same idea, what keeps you going in EMS, and how do you balance that work and personal life? And like, what do you do to decompress? Like, how do you keep yourself sane, or how did you keep yourself sane throughout all of that? Because that's hard stuff.
so kind of the main thing is like because it's almost kind of it's two different things you're kind of asking. One thing is whenever it came to going to school and all that kind of stuff, I had a goal, right? I had a goal, and that was to finish school, whether it be paramedic school, whether it be college, is was to finish, right? And it had a time frame to it. I was like, I know I will be done with school at this point in time. Knowing that, that was not that it wasn't hard, but it made it a lot easier to get through because I was able to have a goal to aim toward. And I knew I was like, I have a couple more months left. I have a couple more weeks left. I have just a little bit of time left. Like I'm almost done with this thing. So that's kind of what kept me going through all of that. And like I said, it was very hard. It's not easy having an infant, having a family, going full time, going to college at the same time. It was a lot, and it was stressful on me. It was stressful on my family. But as far as like trying to keep myself like keep stress levels down and everything, like generally with work, I don't work overtime. Okay, I do not pick up overtime shifts on the truck. And I used to work overtime all the time. Like I had my 48-hour shift on Thursday and Friday, and then every other day of the week I was going somewhere to pick up some kind of daylight shift on a truck somewhere. And I finally kind of got burnt out on that. It's like, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. So I don't pick up any extra shifts on the truck. Now, that being said, um, I will work extra. Okay, I will work overtime, but I'm going to do it as an instructor. I'm not going to do it as working on the truck because my logic behind it is I'm not going to continue to expose myself all the time. It's already enough, right? We work 48 hours a week as it is. It's already enough. I do not want to continue to expose myself. So if I'm gonna work extra, I'm gonna do it. It's something that's not going to give me a lot of grief, right? It's very simple. I say it's very simple. It's not simple, but it's a whole lot easier to work as an instructor than it is to work on the truck because you don't have all that extra stress and stuff you have to deal with. So I don't work any extra on the truck. Um, I forgot to mention, I also work a second job as an instructor at the state fire school. So I kind of forgot about that this whole time since 2020. I've also been working a second job. So in the middle of working a full time job and going to school and all that other kind of stuff. So I went through paramedic school the whole time that I was working the second job and everything too. Paramedic school and college. My boss over there, your PNT instructor, love him to death. He's a very very good guy, very supportive. He's been very supportive of me and getting me through the whole thing. But some other things that I do to kind of help is I try to I talk to my wife and I'm like, look, so I want to work some days. Uh, what do we got planned? I don't have to work these days, but I want to be able to kind of get a little extra money or whatever. So, I talk to her like, what do we got planned? Can I pick this day up? Can we not? And we'll also plan to go do things, go out and do things um, what we were kind of talking about earlier this morning is we want to go out like to more of the state parks and go hiking more. So like the trails at the state parks and stuff like that. Like we'll make a day trip out of it, and we'll go hiking and we'll go places like that, or we'll take some kind of day trip and go somewhere. So I try to spend time with the family doing stuff. I try to stay sensitive to the needs of the family and be like, look, if I can tell that I've been working too much or been gone too much, I try to stay home and not work my other job and all that other stuff. Another thing too is my faith. I use my faith to kind of help keep a good perspective on life in general. So not just my job, but just life in general. And one of the main things I think, obviously, that causes people in EMS to get a lot of stress, cumulative stress, PTSD, and stuff like that is dealing with death and dying all the time, right? That death and dying, that's a part of life. Okay, that is just a part of life. It is going to happen. It's going to happen to the people around us, to the people that we love. It's going to happen to us eventually, right? So I try to keep a very realistic and very healthy outlook on it. And if I have a patient die, or if I have to deal with death and dying on the job, I don't take it personal. Okay, I do not sit there and think it's like, oh my God, did I do everything that I could have done for this patient? No, of course not, because I do every single thing I can for every single patient that I have, right? So if it doesn't work out, then I don't stress it. Like it does not stress me out because it's like that's all I can do because I have no control over that whatsoever. Like I don't have any control over that. And I think that obviously, the odds of us saving somebody, quote unquote, are extremely low compared to not saving them. So if you set yourself up ahead of time, it's like, look, there's probably extremely slim chance that I'm actually going to save this person. That kind of puts you in the right headspace to be able to expect what's going to happen. So I try to, like I say, I try to keep a healthy perspective on it. With that sort of thing, I do the best I can for every single patient. I don't sit there and think about it afterwards. Like, look, did I do everything for this patient? And I hope that doesn't sound too whatever, but I mean, it is what it is, and I try to not expose myself when I don't have to. Like I said, by not going to work, pick up a bunch of extra shifts. I try not to expose myself outside of work to a bunch of stuff. I just basically kind of leave it behind and, just like, look, if I'm not at work, then I'm not doing it. That's not to say I won't help somebody. But I don't go sticking my nose in places that they shouldn't be, whenever I'm not in that role. So that's kind of some of the things that I do, to kind of help keep myself straight. And I think it's worked out so far. That's not to say that I don't have cumulative stress and some of the issues that go with it, but I feel like that I don't need medication. So I think there's that, you know.
Kind of like I heard someone say once, we don't chase the reaper, we prolong someone's time as long as they're given that time. And I think that's a crucial part of keeping the longevity in EMS because, like, yeah, we have some of the tools to save people's lives, but when it's their time, there's nothing we can do about it. And we can't help the circumstances that have happened before we get on scene. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think that's something that should be taught more in EMT school and paramedic school and everything in between because we, like, rightly so, we're trained to save people's lives and we're trained in a way that what we do will bring someone back from the dead or will keep them from dying. But all in all, it's like you said, it's not in our control.
Right, and it's not reality. Okay, it's not reality. I'm a very realist type person. I'm not a pessimist. I'm not an optimist. I'm a realist. Right, I kind of see things how they are, and uh, you know, and a lot of it talking about people going into this profession and what to expect. It's like, well, it really has to do with what their intentions are to begin with, right? And some people can set themselves up well if they have good intentions going into it, and some people they're going to have a hard time because because you know no matter what you tell them, they're going to have their intentions for doing this, and that might conflict with what they actually run into out there.
So tell me about your favorite type of call because there's so many. You got respiratory, cardiac, trauma, psych, codes, lift assist, you got car wrecks, whatever. And I know down in Port Barry, it's pretty wild out there. So what is your favorite type of call?
So I guess my favorite type of call really is going to be any call that I can get a good positive change in the patient's condition, uh, or if I can maintain the patient's condition to get worse. So a lot of people it's like trauma junkies, and a lot of people like oh like the medical and take my way through it. You know, I kind of like it all. You know, I like it all because I like to be able you know, I like to be able to think about stuff, and I also like to be able to have good trauma calls and do sort of thing. But generally, really, honestly, any call that I can get a good, you know, get a good change in condition on the patient, you know, or if they're in real bad shape, at least maintain their condition to where they don't get any worse. And obviously, if I could get some kind of feedback afterwards to know that they actually did better, that's even better, right? Uh, you know, that's pretty much it. That's probably a little bit underwhelming. That's my favorite types of calls, the ones that actually that go well.
I wouldn't say underwhelming. It's definitely an original answer. And dude, I can agree with that. I can definitely agree with that. Speaking of calls, my favorite question. Tell me about the funniest or craziest call, the one that's challenged you. Tell me about a call. Give me a story time, Ronnie.
Okay, so now I've got the funniest, craziest call, and I also have a challenging call that's not the same thing. Okay, so which one do you want first?
Do the one that's challenged you first, and then we'll go to the funny one.
Okay, so the challenging call. So I guess the most recent challenging call that I had was back a handful of months ago. I had an MCI school bus crash with you know some injured kids. So we got a call. We had actually just dropped the patient off at the hospital in Opelousas. Got a few blocks down the road. Get a call from dispatch. Said, "Hey, we've got a motor vehicle accident involving a school bus. Of course, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so school bus is going to be slammed full of kids, right? And they got a report of two patients unconscious. Like, okay, so we we get the call. We're in the middle of Opelousas, and it is west of town. It's on the main highway west of town, like in between Lawtell and Eunice. And so I learned in the past, I was like, let me get my mind in the right place, right? Because we get reports of this, we get, at least 2 people unconscious. It's like, this probably can't be good, right? This isn't your run of the mill, accidentally bump a school bus, get 30 refusals type deal. So they said other ambulance services have been contacted, but you're probably going to be the first one. I was like, okay, that's great. So I shut my computer from working on my ticket, and I start to think. It's like I start pre-gaming with myself, and I start and try to pre-game with my partner, and start getting mentally prepared for what I'm about to see, what I'm going to have to do, and all that stuff. So we get out there, and of course, I am the first one there. So I established incident command, and basically what we had is we had a school bus full of children. I think there were like 30 people on board total, 30. And they had just stopped, like pulled off to let off like 3 or 4 or 5 kids at a house on the highway. Well, whenever they started to get back out on the road, there was a whenever I say a flatbed truck, okay, like think a wrecker, okay, but you used to carry around like lumber and other building supplies and stuff, right? So it was a lumber truck, flatbed lumber truck. Apparently paying attention or whatever, and he was coming down the highway. It was a 65-mile-an-hour zone. He noticed that the school bus was starting to pull back out into the roadside, and he slams on his brakes, and that causes the rear end of the truck, the flatbed part, to kind of spin to the side, and he collides with the back of the bus. So it slams into the back of the bus, and the only thing that catches the back of the bus, thankfully, is just, that much of the flatbed that hits the back of the bus. Injured kids that were sitting at the very back of the bus where it got hit. So went and took a look at them real quick. They were both conscious. They were just pretty hurt. They had obvious broken bones, stuff like that. They were both conscious at the time. So if they were unconscious, they had regained consciousness before we got there. Fire department was maintaining to them. So we got air med, we got air evac and all that stuff coming, more ambulances, just kind of watch them. And so I did the incident command thing and started I told my partner, I said, go check on all these other kids to find out if anybody's injured. I got to get this thing straightened out. So got all the resources kind of coordinated in, talked to Learn on the phone, coordinated resources, getting trucks in there. Ultimately ended up flew those 2 kids out. We flew those 2 kids out to the trauma center. We transported 2 with minor injuries by ground. And then the rest of them, didn't end up needing transport. So we only had 4 patients total, but there was 30 people involved, right? So it's 30 people, 29 of them being kids. Like they were all kids except for the driver of the bus. Worked out well. I didn't ever hear anything back on any of those kids. I'm sure they're probably all fine. I know, like I said, from what I could obviously tell, those 2 kids in the back, they were beat up pretty bad, but they made it. And, it was a lot. And by the time kind of got my head screwed on straight after the time it was all over with and got back on the road, headed back to the station, kind of took a deep breath and was like, whew. It's like, man, that was a lot. There's a lot of running back and forth, a lot of coordinating, a lot of the whole 9 yards, but we made it through. And later on, got a call from dispatch, said, hey, look, state police called, said you did an excellent job, and they just wanted to call and, commend you for the job that you did out there. I was like, well, that's good. I appreciate that. And, just another day's work, But that was a pretty challenging call as far as that goes. Now this other call, okay, the funny, weird one, okay. So I went on COVID deployment back in April of 2020, whenever COVID kind of slammed everything up. I was there for like 28 days doing that. And I had gotten a call while I was there for this patient that was like unconscious or whatever. And this wasn't long after I got there either. It was probably about a week. I think I'd been there about a week. Got a call from a patient that was unconscious, not doing well. It's like, okay, so I went down there, picked the patient up. They were a dialysis patient. They were hyperglycemic. They unconscious, unresponsive, just a train wreck of a patient. You know what I mean? Just like very unhealthy, very not in good shape. Transport the patient to the local ER that's right. Their ambulance station is directly across the street from their hospital over there. So transport them about a mile back up the road to the ICU because they're in crap shape. Well, about a week later from that point, about a week later from that point, it's kind of late at night. I'm on like a 1P to 1A shift, and the other ambulance crew is, we're both sitting at the station because we have two ambulance crews on that side of the river. And they get a call for a pimple that had popped on somebody's arm at that same project that I had picked that patient up from before. Like, okay, so they get in the truck, they go down there, and about a minute or so later, after we hear them on radio get on scene, they start screaming for us. They're like, "Y'all get down here now. We need some help now." I was like, "Okay." So get my partner. We go down there, and we go find that same patient that I had mentioned before that was, hyperglycemic, all that stuff, went to ICU. We get there and we find them on the floor because the crew had ended up moving them onto the floor. And there was the most amount of blood I have ever seen in my life in one place, in the couch, like all in the couch and all over the floor. Like the patient had been sitting on the couch. Well, it turns out what had happened was their dialysis shunt had ruptured. And I never thought that I would ever see something like that happen. Like I'd always kind of wondered. I was like, maybe eventually with all the dialysis patients I will probably see that at some point in time. Well, my day had come. I had finally gotten to see the dialysis shunt had ruptured. As she bled out all in the couch, all over the floor. And so now she was still alive, okay? She was still alive at this point in time, but we had walked in and they were like, "Come on, hurry up, we got to go." I'm like, "Yeah, this is kind of bad, isn't it?" So we helped them with the stretcher, loaded them up in their truck, and they were double stacked that night. They had two paramedics on board, and it was like, "Look, we need some help." So I told my partner, I was like, "Look, here's what we're going to do. You take our ambulance, you go out there, turn it off, lock it up, and you get in their ambulance and you drive us to the hospital, and the three of us are going to work on this patient." So she still had a pulse and everything, but obviously just faintly. She barely had any blood left in her. And so the three of us are just like scrambling to try to get an IV on board, try to get this patient stabilized. Thankfully, we were only like a little over a mile from the hospital. So we get her over to the hospital. Right after we get to the hospital, she codes. So we bring her inside. They have Lucas devices. They have Lucas devices on there, but they also have a Lucas device in the ER. So throw her on Lucas device in the ER, and they try intubating her. They can't intubate her. They try. So the doctor elects to go ahead and do a surgical crike on the patient. So that was something else at the same time that I got to see for the first time as a surgical crike on a patient that they're working. So they set her up. They get some IV. They get some blood on board because I found out, I'd learned that they can't call a code from if they bleed out, or bleed or something before they can try to call it. So they put some blood back in, did CPR for a while, called it, didn't get it back. It's like, okay. So after the call was over and everything, whenever I picked that patient up the first time, right, this is the funny part, all right, this is the dark humor funny part. when I picked that patient up the first time, I told the crews about it. I asked them, I said, man, that woman's in bad shape. And she's like, yeah, but she'll be fine. We've been picking her up for years. She always gets hyperglycemic, or she gets out of whack with her electrolytes because she's a dialysis patient. She gets real sick and then she bounces back. She's fine. We've been picking her up for years and years and years. And I was like, okay. So, and then after this is over and she finally dies, I told them, I was like, well, if you got any more of your regular patients that are sick like that all the time, that always call and are always sick like that all the time, just send me on them, because about a week later they'll be dead and you won't have to worry about them anymore.
Ronnie, no.
And they kind of laughed or whatever about the deal. I was like, I'm not being serious, right? Like I said, that's kind of the dark humor of the deal, right? Because we just work this code and all that kind of stuff, and we're trying to get it right. But I was like, yeah, so if there's any of your other regular patients that you don't want to deal with anymore, just send me on the call, and you won't have to worry about them anymore. So, yeah. But like I said, that's just humor, okay? I don't really mean that. Obviously, I'm not out killing patients or doing anything wrong to anybody. But it was just very interesting. It was just very interesting altogether. Like, there was a bunch of stuff that I got to see for the first time on that one call that I never thought I would see, like the ruptured dialysis shunt, surgical crike. That was the first time I'd ever seen a Lucas device used. It was kind of a lot of firsts on that one call.
What a turn of events from a pot pimple to someone bleeding out and then dying.
Yeah. So very, very interesting how that works, isn't it?
With that in mind, what's some advice you'd give someone either going into EMS or someone already in EMS, someone thinking of going into EMS, besides just like you've already said about why you don't pick up overtime and how to deal with calls like the one you went on with the dialysis shunt rupturing, not letting that affect you in the wrongest way? Like, what is some advice for all of that?
I guess the first thing I would say is, if you have the opportunity, if you actually have the opportunity to go ride first and to see what it's like, I think that would be the best thing. Is like, if you have no clue, like absolutely no clue what it's like, but it's something that you feel like you want to try, go ride. Most ambulance services, if you have the right spirit about it and you're like, well, I'm interested in trying to do this, can I go ride or shadow for a shift or two? They'll be like, yeah, come ride on the board. And just go see what it's actually like, because you might realize that it's like too fast for you, too slow for you. You might get sick at what you see. Like I had one of my EMT students that whenever they were doing their ride time, they actually found out that they couldn't get like terribly car sick. I was like, well, that's kind of going to be unfortunate for you being an EMT, So, kind of find out, try to eliminate as much of those sorts of things as you can ahead of time. Talk to people that work in the field. Go ride if you have the opportunity to. Educate yourself a little bit about it. Start with that first. That expectations aren't out of line with reality. The next thing I would say is, like, give it your all. Go and study and learn. Take pride in your work. That's one of my biggest things, is take pride in your work. Have integrity. Go out there and do the right thing. Be in it for the right reasons, because we both know different people that are out here doing this job for the wrong reasons. And whether they started that way or whether they got themselves into that, I think that it's poorly on them. But it also, you run the risk of, having issues with your coworkers or having issues with your patients if you're not there for the right reasons. So some other stuff I can say on this: be prepared to work with just about anybody, because there are so many different personalities out there doing this. You can be a closed-minded person and be like, well, I just can't work with any of these people. You can't work with anybody. They're not the problem. You're the problem. Okay. I'm just going to say that up front. You are the problem. If you can't be open and be able to work with anybody and at least get through a shift as peacefully as possible. Now, that's not saying that you have to choose to go work with these people repeatedly, but you at least, if you have to work with somebody different, need to be open to working with other people, at least temporarily. Because you never know, like your partner's going to call out sick at some point in time and you're going to have to work with somebody else. At the least, right? At the least, that's what's going to happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to take somewhere. You're going to get hot partners. That's just part of the game. So that's something else you need to expect and be ready for. Also, is having a different partner at some point in time during your career.
I really like what you said about if you can't work with XYZ number of people, there's a common denominator, and it's probably not them.
Most definitely. Because I've heard many people out there, it's like, oh, I can't work with this person. I can't work, or I only want to work with this person or whatever. I'm like, well, I can work with anybody. Like, I can literally go out there and work with anybody. And that's not to say that I'm going to have a good time. Okay. I'm probably not going to have a good time, but I can at least work with them and I can get through the shift. And I think we could probably at least leave no worse off than what we came, right? Then that's kind of the goal in the end. It's not to leave any worse off than what you came in there as. So that's kind of one of my pet peeves about some of the things that people say out there.
So Ronnie, knowing what you know now, reflecting back on the journey, if you could change it all, would you still take this path and go into EMS? Why or why not?
So I absolutely would stay doing this, right? I absolutely would do it. The only thing that I would change is if I would have done it sooner. Like I said, I didn't really think EMS wasn't part of my radar. Did not even become part of my radar until like my mid-20s. I wish that I would have thought about it sooner. I wish that I would have pursued it sooner, like just as soon as I turned 18. I wish I could have went outside or went out there, got my EMT, went ahead and got my paramedic. I probably would have been one of those zero to heroes, because that kind of was almost the intention anyway. Whenever the way that I did do it, but like I said, the whole thing about the advanced EMT class kind of threw me off course by like 4 years. So, like I said, still would do it. Wish I could have done it sooner. That's one of the main things. I would have done it sooner. I would have become a paramedic way sooner. I would have went to college way sooner. I'd have already had my degree by now, bachelor's degree. Probably would even be pursuing my master's degree. And I'm not close to that in the future either. But obviously, more time, more money, and all that kind of stuff too. So that's I think that's how I would have done it, or I wish that's the way it would have shaken out.
So Ronnie, I appreciate having you on. Ronnie's one of the very, very few, and I mean like the only one really, who actually gives me feedback after episodes, and I'm eternally grateful for that. So Ronnie, thank you for riding along in this journey with me. And dude, thank you for coming on and sharing some of your wisdom and insight. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. I really like what you've been doing with the podcast so far, and I'm glad for where it's gonna go, where it's gonna take you. You never really know, right? And this is only the second podcast I've been on. I've been on one other podcast as a guest, but I've been looking forward to doing this. Kind of since you started and having this conversation, and I hope that I hope I contributed well, and I hope that somebody can get something out, out of my story and out of my circumstance, could take it and go and better themselves and those around them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with that,
If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or future topic ideas, please email me at 22@thelipspodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's 22@thelipspodcast@gmail.com. Be safe out there, friends, and never stop learning.